my god. Hi, hello, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be bringing you guys my best books of 2020. I have some coffee, so you might want to grab some coffee or tea or a snack. I've got a lot of shit to say, so let's just get into it. So the 7th book on my list, Angel, and all of the other books in the Infernal Devices trilogy by Cassandra Clare. I was able to find this book at a thrift store, but they didn't have the other 2 books, so I'm on the hunt for them. I needed them all in my book collection because I love them so much. So if you haven't checked out my recent reads video, I will link it down below because I think I talk about quite a few of these books in that video. But I love the Infernal Devices so much. I was not expecting to love this series as much as I did, and I just... There are very few fictional men that I simp for, but Will Herondale and Jem Karstas, is that how to say his last name? I don't even care. Like, oh my god. I love them both so much. I love this series so much. I cannot even describe in words, like, how good it is. And I just... like, literally... okay, I was on Instagram the other day, and I just saw Jem's name, and I was like, oh my god, Jem! And I, like, almost cried. And that's how I think that's kind of, like, how I realized that this book, like, this series has to be on this list, because it is just so good. And really, what other book can literally just make you cry at the mention of a character's name? Like, oh my god. I don't really think there's anything else for me to say about this book that I haven't already said in my wrap-up, or that countless other people have already said. So the 6th book on my list is The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. I got this book from Thrift Books and they didn't give me a dust jacket, so it looks very plain, but it's a very good book. This is another pretty popular series, I would say. I truly cannot wait for the 3rd book to come out. And this is another book that I did talk about in my recent reads video, so if you haven't checked that out and you want to hear more in-depth thoughts, I would just check out that video. But I loved every aspect of this book. This is a YA historical fiction novel, and I really don't read historical fiction a lot, mainly because it is so white, it is so out of cis het, and I'm just not about it. But this book seriously just makes me want to find every single queer historical romance novel under the sun and read it, because it was just so good. And I can't remember, I think this is the 2nd historical romance book I read, because I think the other one I have on this list I read before this one. But I really love historical romance because of all of kind of like the commentary that people can give, especially when it's queer historical romance. And I just, oh my god, I love it. I love the atmosphere of the novel. And this is one of those books where I was completely immersed and where I did not want to stop reading, which is kind of rare for me, because the interesting thing that I find with myself in books is that I do really enjoy reading, but I kind of have to force myself to do it. It's kind of like one of those things where I don't want to start reading, but once I start reading, I'm really into it. And with The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue, I was into it. Like, I was so into it. I did not want to stop reading for nothing. I was just so captivated, and it was so good. And Monty and Percy is one of my favorite couples of literally all time. They're just so cute together. And I loved how Percy's disability was something that didn't make him unlovable. It was just another part of him in his life. And I really want to read more books with disabled characters, because I think that representation is so fucking important. And I think it's something that when we talk about representation, a lot of people forget to mention. And I'm not going to exclude myself from that, because I think I'm just as bad. Like, you know, I feel like I focus so much on LGBT rep and POC rep that sometimes I forget, hey, disability rep is really fucking important too. And I just love that book so much, and it's just it is just truly so incredible. So the next book on my list is actually the only one that I don't have a physical copy of yet. I will get one day, I swear. And that is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This book, oh my god. Oh, this book is like the definition of serotonin to me. So I read this book back in June, and June was actually a really rough month for me. And in particular, that week that I read it, I was just going through a lot. It was a really rough time. And I saw Red, White, and Royal Blue on my script page, and I had heard a lot about it, and I really didn't want to read it. So on a whim, I listened to the audiobook, and when I say that it like saved my life, and it just saved my life, I mean it saved my life. It was just such a light at a point where I felt no light. I felt like everything around me was darkness. And I know that sounds cliche and emo and angsty, but I don't really care. It's the truth. And I know that it's not a perfect book. There are definitely issues with this book. Like, if you look at my Goodreads review, I have a lot of critiques of this book, which I'll go ahead and I'll link that review down below if you want to see it. Okay, I just realized I haven't given like a synopsis for any of these books, but Red, White, and Royal Blue, all of these guys named Alex and Henry, and Alex is the son of the President of the United States, and Henry he's the Prince of Wales, I want to say. They have a sort of rivalry, which is a little more one-sided than you might think at first. And then basically they are forced into faking a friendship after a interesting situation, and I think it wasn't at a wedding, I don't think, or was it a wedding? Something to do with a wedding and a wedding cake, I remember. Basically they have to force this friendship, and then they become real friends, and then they fall in love, and then your cat knocks down your phone. And by far my favorite thing about Red, White, and Royal Blue is just how purely authentic it is. I think sometimes when you read romance, it can seem kind of forced or kind of like, could this really happen? And I think what's so beautiful and what's so stunning and what's so captivating about Red, White, and Royal Blue is how fucking real the romance is. Like, it leaks through the page when Alex and Henry are in the same room. Their chemistry is just undeniable. And I love how fucking hard they fight for each other. They fight like hell to be together. I love the exploration of both of their identities in the novel. And I especially loved Alex and how he kind of had to come to terms with being bi. And I love this book so much more than I can explain in words. And yeah, it is an incredible, incredible book. And if you somehow have not read it yet, I would highly recommend it. And all of the books I'm mentioning, I will have their Goodreads and places to buy them linked down below. Please go check them out, because all these books are amazing. And so book number, are we on 4, I think? Yes, we're on 4, is The Savior's Sister by Jenna Moreci. You all knew this was coming. We all knew this was going to be on my best books of the year video. So, fun fact, I think the most popular video on my channel is my review for TSS, so please go check it out down below. I talk about the main stuff, like world building of the plot and the characters and writing style and stuff like that, and I go really in depth, so go check that video out. But The Savior's Sister is the companion novel to The Savior's Champion, so I will give you the synopsis to TSC. So, The Savior's Champion follows a guy named Tobias as he's entering something called the Sovereign's Tournament, just because basically when you enter, you get a fuck ton of money, and his family really needs that money. Basically, along the way, he's just trying to fight to stay alive, and then he meets the love of his life, Layla. And this book follows Layla. So if you have not read The Savior's Champion, you might want to skip past my little review or gushing of TSS, because this is not TSC spoiler free. So yeah, I will see you when we talk about the next book. Goodbye for now. So now when it comes to TSS follows Layla during the tournament as she is basically trying to fight off her. And this is a really good book. I really love it. And honestly, I think it's really fitting that this is on this year's list, because back in 2018, I made a Best Books of 2018 video. And guess what book was, I think it was number 1 on that one? TSC. And I love Jenna's books so much. I think that she has a natural talent for storytelling. And when I say that I am dying to get my hands on TSA, I am dying to get my hands on TSA. Oh my fucking god, I needed my life immediately. So, one of my favorite things about this book is that, you know, like, she's thick, but, like, also, I've read this book twice now, but my favorite thing about this is both times that I have read it, I read this book in under 2 days. Isn't this a big book, and I'm a slow-ass reader, and I think that just says a lot. Like, TSS is truly one of those books where you do not want to stop reading. Like, you're just constantly reading. And again, like I said earlier, sometimes I struggle to start books and to actually be motivated to continue them. But bitch, this book just really kept me wanting to read every single second. And I just, I love this book so much. And when I was reading TSC, I genuinely think that Layla was probably my favorite character to read about. I wanted to learn more about her. I was so captivated with her. And especially when I found out she was the fucking queen, I was like, oh my god, I need to read her book. And that's what I love about this book, is I love how much we learn about Layla and her magic, and I love her relationship with her sisters, and I love the complex family dynamics, and I love how thirsty she is for Tobias. I love all of it. And one of the best things about this book, I think, is how masterfully, like, everything is. Like, I just think that this is one of those books where if you want a book that's going to show you how to make good characters, read this book. Like, if you want to read a book with a really good plot, read this book. If you want to read a book with really good pacing, read this book. If you want to read a book with a really good writing style, read this book. Like, I feel like this is just, like, such an incredible book. And I know that there's no such thing as a perfect book, but honestly, I think this is a perfect book. Like, I genuinely cannot think of a single thing that's wrong with it, which is very rare for me in books, because I think this is the first book on this list that I genuinely don't have any issues with. Like, I just think it is so incredible, so show-stopping, and I really didn't think it was possible for me to like a book more than TSC. But I like this book way more than TSC, and I still love TSC, don't get me wrong, that has such a special place in my heart, but this book is just so good, and I want you all to read it. Like, please read this book. It is just so good. And yeah, and I will link my relevant videos to TSS down below. I have my review, and then I did 2 TSS tags if you want to check them out, along with my TSS tag playlist. But yeah, I think I'm going to try and stop myself here, but I just love TSS so much, and I want you all to read it. Next up on my list, coming at number 3, is going to be Queer's War by Nina Varla. So Queer's War is a YA fantasy, and it is so good. And also, I want to say, I do love Ironheart as well, but I like Queer's War better, so I'm putting it on the list, but Ironheart is also kind of like right next to it, so. And this book is just one of those books where it will rip your heart out multiple times and you are going to thank this book for it. Like, oh my fucking god. So this book follows 2 lovely ladies. One is Ayla, and she is, at the start of this book, she is basically looking to get revenge because her father was killed by the king. And basically, after an interesting event, she becomes the princess's handmaiden, allows her to get closer to her and closer to the king. That way she can enact her revenge. And then we have Lady Queer, which is the princess, and I really never know if I'm saying her name right, but I guess we can just hope that I am. Lady Queer she is an automaton, robot essentially, but like not a robot, but like basically a robot. And I really love these books. I love, first of all, the writing style. You are going to hear me say this in the rest of these books in this video, but the writing style is immaculate. It is amazing. It is my crack. I am just so here for it. And our leading ladies are just so good. They are so complex. They are flawed, but they are also amazing, and I would die for both of them. And their romance is truly something that I found so fascinating, because Ayla goes into everything, you know, kind of wanting to hate Crier. I don't know, I wouldn't say she actually does hate her, only because, like, I feel like, you know, it's obviously the king who she hates, because that's who killed her dad, but she definitely has a distaste toward Crier, I would say. But I really loved how Ayla kind of realizes that Crier isn't as bad as she thought. Like, she's actually a really good person, and it's really just her father who is a total piece of shit. And I loved that, and I loved how she kind of changed her beliefs and thoughts through their romance, but she also didn't change who she was completely. She just kind of, with this new information, she adjusted her viewpoints, and I think that's something that a lot of people need to do more, you know, you need to, you know, like if you find new information, you need to be okay with changing your opinion. And I just love this so much. And on top of all of that, this is a female-female romance. And the reason it was this high on the list was purely for that reason. Because the thing about female-female books and LGBT books in general that really grinds my gears is sometimes you have to choose between representation and a good book. And what I mean by that is a lot of the queer books I've read, like the writing style isn't very good. If it's a fantasy book, the characters and plot are meh sometimes, and it's really hard to find a book that does it both, that just does both of these concepts so beautifully. But Queer's War has a beautiful romance. It is a phenomenal romance, but it's also a phenomenal book, and unfortunately, I think that's something that's kind of rare with queer books. Really hope that I can find more queer books like this in the future, where not only is the book's aspects like the plot and the characters and the world building really good, but have a really good queer romance to go along with that, because obviously as a queer reader, it's really important to me to find books that have both. So I don't know, it's just, it is such a good book, and if you have not had the chance to read these yet, totally should. So the next book on my list is The Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics. This is a tiny ass book, but it is very good. It's not tiny in page count, really. I guess it kind of is. It's like 300 pages, but like, you know, size-wise, it is a little small. So this is the first historical romance book that I've ever read, and it did not disappoint. So this is another female-female romance, if you couldn't tell by the cover. So The Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics follows, what are their names? This is Lucy and Catherine. So Lucy has basically just watched the love of her life get married to a man. So she finds out that Catherine is looking for someone to translate this really important French text. I believe it has to do with astrology or something. And Lucy has a huge passion for astrology. So she basically shows up to Catherine's house and is like, hey, I know I'm a woman and you probably shouldn't let me do this, but please let me translate it. And then basically Catherine agrees, and Lucy stays at her house for a while to work on translating this text, and it is just so good. And I think that if anyone out there is looking to, first of all, read queer historical fiction, read this book. That is adult, read this book. And finally, if you are looking for any historical books that are feminist and that really talk about feminism and, you know, women having power, definitely read this book. And that is my favorite thing about this book, is how it both has an incredible romance, but it also talks about the issues of the time, and it provides a feasible way for these two women to stay together and be together without being able to, you know, be married in the traditional sense. I also just want to say that the writing style in this book is so beautiful. It's so beautiful. And yeah, I think those are pretty much my thoughts on this book. It is a really good book, and I would highly recommend it, so please read it if you haven't already. It is just so incredible. And last but not least, my favorite book of 2020 was The Brilliant Death by Amy Rose Capata. You're not crying. Oh, okay. So, I talked about this book in my recent reads wrap-up, which again is linked below. Go check it out. But basically, The Brilliant Death is a YA fantasy book. I believe it kind of also could be considered a historical book because it is set in the past. The book follows a gender-fluid person named Theo, as basically their father is poisoned along with a group of other people's fathers by, I think it's the Kappa or someone in charge of Italy and stuff, and basically all of the sons of these fathers are forced to go to the capital to basically take their father's place. And Theo goes with their brother Luca, I think is his name. But basically, Luca does not want to take his father's place. He's like, no, I don't want to do it. But Tio does. And things change a little bit when Tio meets Celio, who is a shape-shifting person. They are able to shapeshift between being a man and being a woman. And Tio asks Celio to teach them how to shapeshift, because I don't think I mentioned this yet, but both of them are Strikers, aka magic users. And then Celio basically teaches Tio how to use magic and how to shapeshift, essentially, and yeah, and that is basically the overall plot of this book. So I really loved this book, obviously, since it's my best book, my favorite book of 2020. And if you saw my recent reads video, you already know that I talked really in depth about this book. So instead of talking about the plot or the characters or the pacing, which is all really good, I kind of want to talk about the reason that this is my favorite book of the year, which has everything to do with Tio and Celio both being gender fluid. So I still don't quite know how to explain the feeling of being represented when it comes to my gender, because, you know, I've read a lot of queer books, like the majority of the books on this list have been queer, and I've read a lot of female, male, stuff like that, and I really have felt seen through those kind of books when it comes to my sexuality. But when it comes to my gender, first of all, it's a little harder to find books that, you know, represent me, but also it's a really strange feeling still. Like, I remember feeling this way with my sexuality, but it's so much deeper when it comes to my gender, I think. And maybe it's because I haven't completely figured out my gender, to be honest, or maybe it's because it still kind of feels new, or maybe it's because society in general doesn't accept trans people the way that they accept gay people and lesbians and bi people and stuff like that. And I think one of the hardest things for me when it comes to being non-binary / gender fluid is the isolation aspect, because I feel like you can go anywhere online or in person and you can find people who talk so openly about their sexuality. And while you still can find those kind of things with being trans, I think it's a lot harder sometimes, because I think it's so personal and it's so hard to open up. And just for a lot of the time that I have kind of questioned my gender and the time that I've accepted it and stuff like that, it's just been, you know, like, it's just been me, and it's been so isolating. And books, you know, have always been a really important part of my life, obviously. And for me, it was really important to me to read this book, and to read a book where the MC is gender fluid. And it's that simple. Like, that's who they are. And, you know, Tio is so much more than their gender. You know, they are smart, and they are cunning, and they are fierce, and they are loyal. And this book was incredible, and it made me feel less alone, and I felt like this book gave me a warm hug, and it said, it's okay, you know? It's okay that you're not cis. And I really needed that. And I don't think I realized that I needed that, but I needed that, because I think that sometimes people think that coming to terms with your gender is, you know, a straight line, you know? You realize you're not cis, you come to terms with it, the end. But it's not like that. I feel like it's, you know, there's twists and there's turns, and there's, oh, I'm okay, no, I'm not, blah, 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 blah. And I feel like I didn't completely realize that I really needed to read more books with trans characters, and one of my big goals for 2021 is to read a lot more books with trans characters, specifically non-binary characters, because I feel like I need more warm hugs like this. I feel like I just need to read more books and be able to feel that way. And I really wish more people would make efforts to read trans books and read non-binary books, you know, and really give, like, trans people the representation. And honestly, I can only dream to touch my gender non-conforming readers as much as The Brilliant Death has touched me, and how much it's helped me. And just, I think that even though I would say I have accepted my gender for sure, I don't think that I'm, you know, like, at the end, you know, I don't think that, you know, there are still plenty facets of my gender that I don't understand, and that I maybe haven't come to terms with just yet. And I think books like this remind me that it's okay, and that everyone kind of has their own relationship with their gender, they have their own experiences, And, you know, while I continue to try and figure things out, I think that there will be books like this that will kind of help me along the way. And at the very least, make me smile and make me feel less alone. And I know a lot of that basically had nothing to do with this book, but this is my best books of the year video, and truly that is the reason this is the best book of the year, because it just helped me so much. This book is incredible. And I'm gonna stop rambling now. Okay. So with that being said, I think that's all that I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please give it a big thumbs up and hit that big red subscribe button down below. Turn on post notifications so that you know every time that I upload. And yeah, I think that's all I got for you today. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!